Hey guys, this is Black Bolt. Today is Wednesday, October 6th. And as you can see, when I start my car, I have 173 miles of range. Haven't driven at all this morning, so trip is at 0. And there you can see that I'm averaging 4.8 miles per kilowatt hour. The topic of today's video is why did we choose the 2019 Nissan LEAF with a 40 kilowatt hour battery? And to provide some background as to why we ultimately went with the Nissan LEAF, about 4 years ago, my wife and I went on a debt payoff journey, and we paid off over $140,000 in debt. And that includes her 2018 Chevy Traverse Premier and our old 2017 Chevy Bolt EV. Going back into debt for a vehicle was not one of the options that we considered. So in the end, we came up with 3 solutions on what to do with our Chevy Bolt EV. So with debt off the table, we were basically left with 3 options. The first was to keep the Chevy Bolt EV. Option number 2 was to return the Bolt and buy an ICE car and save the money for the next EV. And option 3 was to get another EV in a very tough used car market. Option 1, keep the Bolt and wait for the battery repair. This option was kind of enticing because we would get a newer, bigger battery for our Bolt with over 140,000 miles on it, which would be a fantastic option because, as you guys know, batteries are very, very expensive. The reason that we didn't go with this option is General Motors would just not commit to any kind of timeline on when they will have battery replacements. And I know that on the day that we returned our car, they announced that modules were going to be available starting in October. But when I talked to the dealer, the fact that modules are available doesn't mean that they're going to start installing them in cars in October. And GM still wasn't giving the dealer any information on when they would actually be able to do these repairs for customers. And also, the way that they decide who gets batteries first is very secretive and not something that they are willing to share. So that would have left us in a lot of limbo. I live in Minnesota, and with winter coming up, I did not want to have a car that had very many restrictions on it. I've got 4 kids. All of their bedrooms are on the garage side of the house, and I charge close to 100% on a daily basis. So my wife just did not want to have the car in the house in its current state for a very long time. So that's kind of why we shied away from that option. Option 2 was to buy a very cheap ICE car and save the rest of the money while saving up additional cash to get the next EV. And I did a lot of research on this, and the math is still the same today as it was when we got the Bolt, which is basically that no matter how cheap of an ICE car I get, I was still going to be spending $200, $300, $400 a month on gasoline depending on its efficiency. And so I would end up spending way too much money just driving and maintaining that ICE vehicle. Based on the math that I conducted, there was no way to come ahead, even in the medium to short term, because the cost of operating an ICE car is that much higher than the cost of operating an EV. So we shied away from going that route. And then option 3, obviously, is the option that we chose, was to complete the buyback, get the money, and get into a different EV. And so we ended up going with the 2019 Nissan LEAF. It only cost us $250 out of pocket because we got a really good price on this one, and it was in Minnesota, and the dealership was willing to drive it to deliver it to us. We chose that option because it's an option that kept us out of debt and also didn't result in us spending a whole bunch of money on gasoline and maintenance on an ICE vehicle. And now let's get into the specifics of why we got the Nissan LEAF as opposed to a different electric vehicle. So after owning the Chevy Bolt EV for over 2 years and driving at 97,000 miles, I have a pretty good grasp on what I need out of an electric vehicle that can drive 3,500 miles a month and not leave me stranded. And I needed to do a lot of research on the prices of EVs. And as you guys know, cars are very, very expensive right now. There is a limit to what you can get from in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. And obviously my wife and I, as soon as we paid off the Traverse, we started saving money for our next car, because by that point we knew that there were issues with the Bolt that may or may not be resolved in the near future. So we were willing to go as high as probably $25,000, taxes included. So I did research on all kinds of different vehicles. In winter, I knew that I needed a car that can probably go 120 miles, which this LEAF can. And so that's one of the reasons that we had considered an ICE vehicle in the first place. If I would have been able to get a hybrid and then saved up to get either the ID4 or a Tesla or something like that, that would have been an option. But ultimately, we decided that we wanted to get an EV right away, because just the prospect of having an ICE vehicle as a daily driver is not something that I was the least bit excited about. And my wife also really likes having an EV in the family. She has grown very accustomed to driving electric vehicles, and she actually likes the LEAF a lot. The LEAF was our first go-to car because this 40 kilowatt-hour LEAF is actually the first EV that we drove, and it's the first EV that we considered because, like I said, I do math and I understand how I use the car. So initially finding the 240-mile LEAF in the same price bracket, Bolt EV in the same price bracket as a LEAF made that a no-brainer. But with that off of the table for now, we decided to go back and take a look at the LEAF. Well, we didn't look at this one, but did research on them, on the pricing, and we got quotes from dealers. Basically all of the dealers, if you reach out to them for a quote, even through like the company's corporate website, they're going to try and rip you off. So if I go to Nissan's website and configure a 40 kilowatt-hour Nissan LEAF and get a quote, they send it to the dealer. The dealer calls and offers you a $45,000 car, even though the car that you configured was $25,000. And this is happening across the board. It's not just Nissan. We have done that with other manufacturers. That was a state trooper, I think. I'm not sure why he was on that road. I don't think that road is a Minnesota highway, but anyway, so that's happened. Kia, same deal. You go and configure a car, they call you back, they'll offer you a $47,000 Nero. So I did a lot of research. One of the cars that I actually researched was Chevy Bolt EV, because we did think about replacing our Bolt with a different 2017 Bolt EV Premier with lesser miles. But as you can imagine, the prices on those actually went up as things got crazier. Demand for them went higher instead of lower. So that was going to be a tough one for us to be able to swallow. There were some 62 kilowatt-hour Nissan LEAFs that were below $30,000 but still out of our price range. And so I just kept doing more and more research. Initially, I wanted at least an SV trim with Pro Pilot Assist, which is similar to Tesla's Autopilot. Ultimately, this one popped up. It was $18,000 and in-state. Its owner bought it in California and then moved to Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is, world-famous Mayo Hospital. And let's see. Okay, I'll go ahead. So this car ended up at a dealership in Rochester, Minnesota, and it was $18,000, which is the cheapest that I had seen. Only 11,000 miles and certified pre-owned, which means that if we have any needs of maintenance and repairs for it. For the most part, Nissan will take care of those up to 100,000 miles or 7 years from our date of purchase. It also had the charge package, which comes with the EVSE, which we don't need because we already have an electric car and an EVSE in our garage. But more importantly, and this was a non-negotiable, it came with the winter package. The winter package gives us heated seats, heated steering wheel, and I'm sorry, it's called the cold weather package. It comes with a heat pump, so in winter, this car should be more efficient than the Chevy Bolt was, and I'm estimating that it's going to get around 120 miles per charge, which is more than I need on a daily basis on most days. Now, there are days in Minnesota when the temperature drops below like 20 below Fahrenheit, in which case I probably will just stay inside my house and not brave those kinds of temperatures. But outside of that, I'm really excited about this car. It's been super fun to drive, and my wife and I are both enjoying it, and she's actually liking it so much that she could see us keeping it on the long term. I'm personally still leaning towards saving a bunch of money so that once the value of this car and the cash we have on hand is $40,000, I would still like to get a Tesla Model 3 at some point, or a VW ID4. ID4 is very nice, very comfortable. I've been driving this car in eco mode, and it's not as offensive as it was in the beginning, but this car, even when it's in eco mode, if you mash the gas pedal, it will override eco and go back to its 6.5 second sprint. Whereas with the ID4, the way, I don't know if it was a setting, but when I mashed the go pedal on that car, it did not have that extra boost. It did not automatically take itself out of that very comfy, non-exciting drive mode. So to summarize, the 3 top reasons that we got the 2019 Nissan LEAF S. Reason number 1 is we understand our needs, and this car meets all of our needs, especially on a short-term basis for how we use an EV. Reason number 2 is the price. We were able to get this car for a total of $250 out of pocket. That means that we were still able to pay cash for it and not need to take out a loan to buy a vehicle, because that's not something that we wanted to do. And number 3, it's a really cool car. It's a fun car to drive, and it's a car that we had been thinking about buying as far back as 3 years ago. And so definitely, whenever you're thinking about making a major purchase, house, car, whatever it is, think about how it fits your needs, how it fits your budget. Does it fit in the values of your family? So are you willing to, or are you not willing to go into debt to buy the thing? And then make the decision from there for what works best for you and for your use case. I've had some people say that this is a downgrade, and that's an interesting perspective in my opinion. To me, it's not a downgrade, because I've gone from a car that was worth around $8,000 to a car that's worth around $18,000, and I've spent $250 to do it. This car still meets our needs as well as our last car did. It does have less range, so in that sense you could say that it's a downgrade, but it still does everything that we do with this car that we did with our previous car. Our previous car just had bonus range that I took advantage of because it was there, but it's not something that I initially would have gone out of my way to buy. Thinking of that in future terms, Tesla isn't selling a standard range Model Y at the moment, but if in the future they brought back that standard range and they were selling it for around $40,000, that would be a much better fit for our family than the current long range that is being sold for $54,000, I believe it is. It's just extra money that for us we can do something better with, like invest in our family, invest in our children, than to just spend it on a car because we want to have comfort with having extra range that we don't actually need. And when car manufacturers make decisions like this, Nissan actually did a ton of research when they built their original Leaf, and they found that something like 90% of car users would be able to fit in with that 87-mile range. Now, personally, I think that's a little bit short, but if I lived in Minneapolis and my kids went to school in Minneapolis, and I didn't do side hustles that required driving a lot, then yeah, that would probably work. And we actually also considered the 125-mile VW Golf, because Golfs are pretty cool cars. I've owned a Golf in the past, but with Minnesota winters and the price of those Golfs, it just wasn't, to me, that was on the border of usable. If we were looking at something like 90 miles of range in winter, that's not something that I would want to deal with personally. But I have a coworker who has a 125-mile VW Golf, e-Golf, and he likes it a lot. So definitely you want to spend on a car that fits within your budget and fits within your lifestyle. If you are one of the rare people who goes on a 1,000-mile road trip every weekend, this car is not for you, and that's perfectly okay. So hope that makes sense to everybody. Love you all. Have a great rest of the week.